Hello, and welcome to another indie author interview today on the channel. I am joined by the amazing A.F. Stewart, who actually interviewed me a while ago, and we met and we've become fairly good friends in the writing community. I'm absolutely thrilled to have her on today. So without any further ado, introduce yourself. Tell the world who you are.
Okay, hi. I am A.F. Stewart. That's what I write under. My name's Anita, in case anybody's wondering. I write dark fantasy. I also write horror fantasy and straight up horror. I've also write a little poetry on the side from time to time. And I've actually got a new horror poetry book in the works, but that's not what we're here to discuss. Anyway, and my latest book is that one. Past Legends, first book in the Camelot Immortals series. And I also have this one out, Horror Fantasy, Visions and Nightmares, all women doing bad things and having bad things done to them.
I love that cover. I love the hand coming out of the
that actually, I designed that one myself. I design all my covers.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it actually came out really well, and I'm very proud of that one. So
yeah, it's beautiful. So we are here today to talk about your experience writing women on every side of conflict. Last week I had a whole panel talking about leading ladies, but today we want to kind of shift focus into the more villainous and one could even say more fun side of things.
Well, I would definitely say more fun.
So give me a little bit of background. How did you come to write mostly female-fronted novels and especially like have kind of this thing for female villains?
Well, it started when I was writing the sequel to my horror collection, Killers and Demons. And I wrote the first collection. It's just like 5 short flash fiction short stories. And but 4 out of the 5 of those stories were from the male villain point of view. And when I was writing the sequel, I kind of wanted to write the female villain point of view because I figured they should have some fun too. And so I wrote a couple of stories. My favorite is the Regency era story with the 2 serial killer women, lesbian couple, which is fun. I really like those 2. They may actually get another story someday because they were a lot of fun to write. And that's actually where, if you go on my website, it says, "Don't drink the tea." That's actually where it comes from that story. So don't ever drink Jane's tea. I'm just saying, don't.
Got it.
And so, yeah, and there was a couple of, I wrote a sort of a Jack the Ripper female story. And a couple of other, and the long-suffering wife who turned into a serial killer. So, and then off her husband at the end. So, and then when I was writing Visions and Nightmares, I just came up with the stories, and I had all these stories that I'd written, and I noticed they were all women up to that point. I said, well, I'm just going to write the whole thing from a woman's point of view. All women protagonists doing horrible things and getting horrible things done to them. So, and then this book started as a short story, Legendary Debts, which is in the prequel to this. And the original idea was Merlin was a dick.
I mean, plausible.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, every story about Camelot, Merlin's this great wizard helping Arthur. And I thought, well, what if Merlin was a dick? And I just thought, well, who would be opposing Merlin if he was this jerk? And I thought, well, Nimue, because in the original legend, she's the one that locks him up in a cave or turns him into a tree or whichever legend you go on. So I thought, well, what if she did that to stop him from ruining the world? And that's where she started as the main character of the Camelot Immortals. And then I just kind of threw in all the women friends of hers to help her out. So it's got an entire cast of women except for poor Martin, who's sort of like the token male.
Well, I mean, you get that so often flipped. So, you know, you
Yeah.
take classic fantasy, but even some more modern fantasy where you'll have a cast of all men and that, like, token woman over there in the corner, either as a love interest or someone to protect or someone to go rescue. And
Yeah,
it's very rare, actually, that you see that reversed where there's a cast of all women and, like, the random dude.
yeah, that's poor Martin. I feel so sorry for Martin because he's kind of like the fish out of water. He's the inexperienced wizard. Like if you read Grail Days, which is also in the prequel, you will know Martin, how Martin's story started, and who Martin is. I don't want to spoil it too much, but he sort of fell into being a immortal wizard. So Nimue took him under her wing, and he sort of dragged along on all this magical mayhem that's way over his pay grade. And he just has to kind of go with the flow, and he cooks a lot to calm his nerves. So that's why you have a lot of scones and tea and sausages and things in the book.
But is this tea safe to drink?
Oh yeah, he makes a good cup of tea, Martin.
Okay.
It's British,
No
you see.
poison?
I mean, it's set in Britain. They have to have the tea. I mean,
It is true. It is actually required to drink.
And this crew douses their tea with a lot of whiskey. So,
I mean, how else should you have tea?
yeah.
So, in writing all these female protagonists and antagonists, do you find that there's significant difference than writing their male counterparts?
Yeah, kind of. Because I mean, they're all same people, but they do come at it at a different perspective. And like with the past legends, it comes at it a lot from an emotional perspective because the main character is dealing with a ton of emotional baggage from a lot of bad past relationships, and a lot of people lying to her, and a lot of people manipulating her because she's the chosen one, right? But she doesn't want to be the chosen one. And she wants to tell everybody to go piss off. But she can't because people keep throwing her into trouble and she has to get her and her friends out of trouble. So it's sort of like, yeah. And she comes very close to doing some very nasty things in book 2, where she's kind of like deciding whether she wants to go to either the good side or the bad side, right? Because the book 1 ends in a very bad thing for a very good reason, which I can't tell anybody because it's a big spoiler. But if you've read it, you know what the bad thing is. And actually, one of the reviews said it was she was very cold in this, which is the whole point.
Well, it seems appropriate given that Nimue is often portrayed as a villain. And I find that, a lot of times when you switch the plot around and you focus on villains as the protagonists, they still have to maintain something of their original nature, especially if there's like legends and stories that you're basing it off of. So yeah. How did you balance that, creating a, realistic based on legend set of characters, but flipped around this way?
Well, she just wants a quiet little peaceful life in her cottage doing her gardening, right? And teaching Martin the ropes. So she gets dragged into this unwillingly. I mean, she's just doing this basically because there's a lot of magical mayhem. And it's kind of like everyone's kind of saying, go fix it, go fix it. Because she's the most powerful witch around at this point. So she's just sort of doing this unwillingly for her friends, just want to get it done and over with and go back to her cottage. But she does have a ruthless streak. She will do what she has to do to get it done. And what she has to do is a very bad thing, but it's sort of ordained and destiny at the same time. So it's like, and she was willing to do something else as well. So that kind of balances it. If the one thing couldn't be done, because it had to be done willingly by her and by the other party that is involved. And she was willing to do something else, which was self-sacrificing. So that kind of balances out, at least I hope it does. But she is very ruthless. And you see that more in book 2, because there's another thing that happens in book 2, which another guy gets it, and he deserved it. He really did deserve it. He deserved everything he got.
Well, I mean, I think it's hard in, in the world we live in, and with the aftermath of, say, the Me Too movement and all of that, to write mostly female casts and not touch upon the fact that one of the very universal experiences that women face is just issues because of being women.
Yeah.
How do you incorporate that?
Well, like I said, with this series, Nimwe's dealing with the bad relationship she had with Merlin. That caused a lot of emotional baggage, a lot of distrust, a lot of things she's still dealing with. And in book 3, she actually goes to therapy.
What a novel concept in a book.
Yeah, Morgan, that's her friend, Morgan Le Fay. She calls the witch therapist, and she makes a house call, and they force Nimue into therapy, which she doesn't listen to, and then goes off and does something really stupid and gets captured by the villains, and then gets rescued by someone else. And yeah, and then there's couples therapy later because Merlin may or may not come back. I'm just saying.
I mean, you can't have someone like that.
Well, technically Merlin's still around. Right now he's a tree. Because if you read Legendary Deaths, you know how he became a tree. But he may or may not come back in book 3. I'm just saying. Anyway, so he, yeah, so so there's a lot of therapy, and so she deals with her issues, and then there's her destiny thing comes up in book 4, and she finds out the truth and everything, and she has to deal with all of that. So it kind of works out in the end. And in book 4, she makes a choice. She makes a choice at the end of the book, which I won't say, but everything works out. Maybe.
That's beauty writing.
It doesn't work out entirely
do you?
Good. I mean, at one point, I was going to kill the entire cast off.
It's occasionally healthy to kill an entire party off.
Yeah, I was in a bad mood. I thought, well, I'm just going to kill everybody off. And these people are immortal too, by the way. Anyway, but let's just say things didn't go that badly, but they're not a happy ending either. So,
so when you're crafting a villain, and we're going to make this more broad because you're a horror writer. You do villains really well. Like, that's one of the things you're known for. What is your process in crafting a villain that is scary, yet, especially when you're writing from the villain's perspective, still something that an audience can latch on to and, be their perspective?
Well, I try and give them a motivation that's relatable. I mean, just taken to the extremes. Unless, of course, you're dealing with serial killers, and then they're just serial killers.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody can I don't know, they can't relate, but everybody gets a serial killer. They're just bad people. Yes. But if you're doing a villain, like with the villain I did in Saga of the Outer Islands, the Nightmare Crow, he's a he, but his motivation was selfish but understandable. And he went to extremes to achieve what he wanted. And met a bad end at the hands of Death, who was a woman. Oh, I love Death. Death was fun to write.
Do you find that your female villains and heroes are received differently than your male characters? And have you had any problem with, like, as indie authors, we always have to have at least a mind to, the industry side of things. How do you think audiences have received your villains, and is there any difference between whether they're male or female?
I don't think there's any difference between the villains.
Mm-hmm.
The female heroes sometimes get, because I mean, like I said, you have to be careful how far I think you go with the female protagonists. because people don't really receive the person who's supposed to be the hero too well if they're too mean, unless you're writing grimdark or something. Especially if it's a woman. That gets a little tricky sometimes. If you're doing the straight up villain, they don't care. Male or female, they don't really care. Because villains, you know, supposed to be bad. So, yeah.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's fun because, like, when I was writing Saga, the villain in the first book, the Goddess of the Moon, she's straight up insane. Something very, very bad happened to her a long time ago and drove her mad. And she just takes out all her anger and frustration on the world. But at the end of that, she's redeemed and she becomes an ally in books 2 and 3. She's still crazy, but she's the good guy now. So then I never had anybody have a problem with that. I guess she never did anything particularly horrible she couldn't be redeemed from. Yeah, no, she just offed the whole entire half a town or something, but no, that's fine.
I mean, almost every hero does that at some point. That is something I've always found very interesting, how if a hero does something horrible that causes a lot of death and a whole bunch of stuff, audiences, you know, they're the audience perspective. So there's this like acceptance that sometimes this is what it costs to defeat the evil. But if you change your perspective to the, you know, random person who lives in that random village that got demolished, the hero coming there and like having a battle right there is the worst thing that ever happened. And I've always been fascinated by the whole idea that, you know, the heroes would be villains depending on the perspective. Yeah. I feel like that's kind of something that you've been playing with the whole Nimue Merlin of reshaping legends to change the perspective, which is fascinating to me.
I like to switch perspectives on that because, I mean, I like my heroes or my supposed heroes turn into villains, like turn and betrayal. There's a lot of betrayal in this series, which is my favorite thing in the world, betrayal. But yeah, I mean, so I like to play with that. I also like to twist things. So, like, I'm writing one now, a second story in my Norse Tales, where the hero is actually Loki, and he's actually the hero. He's not a trickster who just is doing good things. He's actually the hero, and all the bad things you heard about him are lies and propaganda.
Propaganda, my favorite subject in fantasy.
It's like Balder is actually the villain. So this shining hero that, you know, that Loki supposedly had killed in the legends, he actually killed him, but because Balder was trying to take over the world and kill Odin. So he saved the world by killing Balder, and now he's the villain for it. So that's the whole premise of the thing. And there's 3 ghost elves in it as well, which is a long story. And in the second story, there's a chicken.
Like a Fable got to kick it off the curb chicken?
No, an actual chicken.
Okay.
A rooster. I just stuck this in because the first line came to my head. I was standing at the gates of Helheim holding a chicken.
Mm-hmm. It's great.
Actually, he kind of is, because he's just this idiot. Balder is this kind of idiot who thinks he's a hero but isn't. So yeah, he is kind of Captain Hammer.
Captain Hammer was such an interesting take on that. Like, when you actually think about it, like, terrifying villain. But again, because of the lens, he looks like a hero to a lot of people. And it sounds like you're playing with both sides of that, where, you know, villains who are actually people who are perceived as villains who are actual heroes, and people who are perceived as heroes who are actual villains. But I know that, I mean, kind of going back to the topic of today, which is, you know, female perspectives. Can you tell me a little bit about your experience writing women on the same side? Because that's something that I really love about mostly female casted books, is that you get these really strong relationships between friends.
Yeah, because that's kind of the core of the Camelot War series. There's 4 friends. There's Morgan and Nimue. They're best friends, really. I mean, and they've been best friends kind of like for centuries. So they have this very long history, this kind of shorthand, this sort of backing each other up always. And even when she finds out Morgan lied about something, there's this tension, and but Morgan asks, "Are we okay?" And Nimue says, "We will be." You know, she's mad at the time, right at this moment, but she knows that she will get over it because they're friends and their bond is strong. And then there's the dynamic between Vivian and Nimue, because like in a lot of tales, Nimue's the Lady of the Lake, but not all of them. So I went with having a separate Lady of the Lake called Vivian. And she's the prophet of the group. Like she has the psychic visions, and she actually lives in the lake. So she drips water when she comes to visit and stuff. Yeah, and Nimue always has a towel handy when she comes to visit because she's always wet. And she also likes to secretly douse her tea with mead and whiskey, and then get a little tipsy, and then she gets snarky. Because there's a little tiny bit of romantic rivalry between Vivian and Nimue, because Vivian had a crush on Merlin, which is how she got stuck in the lake, because she listened to Merlin.
Oh, I like him less and less. The more you talk about him, the less I like him. I didn't like
Merlin
him a great deal at the beginning.
Yeah, I don't pull any punches. Merlin's a real... Oh, he's a jerk. I mean, he had his reasons for being a jerk, and you find that out as the series goes on. So I kind of lessen it, but he really doesn't not be a jerk.
Well, I think having reasons is so important when writing antagonists of any kind, because if you just have someone who's acting badly for no reason, the audience has no ability to predict their moves or think or like just basically just theorize. And theorizing about why someone's going to do something and if they're going to do something is such a fun part of reading.
Yeah, I mean, I always like to give my villains motivations. They have to have reasons for doing the things. I mean, if you're doing like I said, if you're doing the serial killers, and I've done a couple of female serial killers too, but I mean, they have their reasons. They have their own motivations, as twisted and bizarre as it is. I mean, even real life serial killers, they all had motivations. They all had reasons. I mean, we wouldn't think of them as reasons or understand them or agree with them, but to them, they were reasons.
Yes.
So yeah, all the villains have to have some reason for doing what they do.
Or they wouldn't do what they do.
Yeah. But I mean, they got to have good reasons too. I mean, and relatable reasons. I mean, like with she's a villain in Grail Days, Elaine. But she's doing this because she's sick of being second best, right? She's sick of being the villain in this piece. She's sick of being, always thought of less than Nimue. And so she just says, well, I don't care anymore. I'm just going to be the villain. I'm just going to do what I want. I'm going to get the power. I'm going to be the number one top dog for a change. Of course, she isn't. And doesn't end up, she doesn't end up the top dog in Grail Days, but she comes back.
And I'm sure that, failure is such a appreciated thing. It's something that I know that I screwed up with in my first book, in my first major draft. I sent it to my editors, and they sent it back with, "No one's failing." I was like, "Oh my God, that's horrible. Yes, I need to fix it right away," because that's where you get character growth. And I do feel like traditionally, I'm talking about classic fantasy again. Indie fantasy and modern fantasy has really gone a long way towards fixing this. But there was this kind of perfection box that a lot of women were put in fantasy for a very long time, where they weren't allowed to fail and they weren't allowed to make mistakes and they weren't allowed to be anything less than perfect. And it's really nice to see people taking it a different direction and really pushing the box of not just making these idealized female characters, but making real interesting ones.
Yeah. Well, Nimue is a swearing, drinking, grumpy woman who does not like people.
Yeah, as are most women I know. Swearing, grumpy. I mean, sounds realistic to
me. Yeah, I think she is realistic. I mean, she just wants to stay home and garden and drink her meat, and everyone keeps telling her to get out and do things, and she's going, I don't want to. It's like she's like the ultimate introvert who keeps getting pulled into the extrovert's messes. So
yeah, introverts unite. I mean, I'm somewhere in the middle, but I have deep respect for characters who are introverts, because so often they're like, no, must be charismatic, and then sometimes you just have characters who want to stay home and garden and drink. That's valid. It's harder to get them into stories sometimes, but it's super valid. All right. Unfortunately, we are at the 25-minute mark. We only have 5 minutes left. These half hours always go so fast. So I'm going to actually steal the question that I used in our panel about female protagonists. So please tell us where we can find you, and where we can buy your books and where we can support you. But also, if there is one trope about women characters that you could throw away and never see again, what would it be?
Oh, that's easy. The trope where you have a smart woman who does really dumb things just for the plot. I hate that. I mean, people do dumb things. I don't have a problem with that. But they do dumb things for reasons. They don't do dumb things out of character. And so many things, I've seen so many women characters portrayed as being smart. They're scientists, or they're doctors, or they're whatever. And they're supposed to be smart and professional. And they just do stupid things across the board. It drives me mad.
That is a very frustrating one. Yes, absolutely. So where can we find you?
Okay, so you can find me at my website, which is afstewart.ca. And you can find me on Twitter at @scribe77. And over on Facebook, I have a page, and I have a group called AF Stewart's Minions. And my books are on Amazon. The only one in KU is this one. The rest are all wide, so you can find them on Barnes & Noble and Kobo and all the other nice places that are out there, which I can't remember. And so, yeah, that's pretty much me. So,
well, thank you so much for coming on today. I've been a very big fan of your channel, your work. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you. Before we head out, any last words of wisdom that you would like to share with authors who are just starting out about writing engaging, interesting female characters?
Well, just write female characters. Don't think of them as female characters, because that's how I do it. I don't think of them as female characters. I just think of them as people. I mean, that's the one thing. When women write men, they don't think, oh, well, they're male. How am I going to write a male? We just write characters. So especially if you're a male writing women, don't think of them as female. They're not strange. They're not unique. They're not weird. They're just people. So write people. We have the same emotional things. We hate, we do stupid things. We put foots in our mouths, And I recently seen this weird thing where a guy described how women pee weirdly. Women don't pee weirdly, just saying. And we don't stare at our breasts in the mirror either, by the way. Just saying, don't write that. Don't ever write that. It's just stupid. Unless you're doing a breast exam, you don't stare at yourself in the mirror.
How very, very true. It never happens.
I hate that.
I know. Some descriptions, the male gaze in fantasy, I could do a whole episode just about avoiding male gaze. But unfortunately, that is us for this evening. Thank you so much, Anita, for coming on today. It was an absolute pleasure, and I hope to have you back soon.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.